Hello once again, my fellow Jeti users. Welcome back to my workshop for another of Harry's little Jeti Clinic videos. And this is the second of the requests I got on Christmas Day. And this one is for somebody who, with their glider, wants to operate the flaps on what a lot of people call the throttle control. We'll call it the P4 stick, really, because obviously it's not throttle if you're operating flaps. And one then wants to be able to operate his flaps on sort of approaching towards land, and at some point simply operate a two-position switch which will give a fixed amount of crow braking or butterfly braking, if that's the term you prefer, and thus disabling the flap control so that it has no more effect on it, but just a fixed amount of butterfly. How can he do that? Well, let's dive in and have a look at how I would set that up. I'm also going to make the assumption that you've got speed mode and thermal mode on your system, because if you're flying a glider, there's a good chance you've got that. So I wanted to prove that it doesn't have any bad effects on that and how you tie it in with modes. So let's go dive in and see how I've got this model set up. So we've come down here and we've got the function assignment. The flaps are assigned to the P4 stick. But very importantly, because these are flaps that go up as well as down, because you're going into speed mode, you don't want the P4 stick to operate from the middle, because pushing it upwards would give you up flap or speed mode, and then downwards would give you down flap. You want it to operate in just one direction. So we have a look in here, we've switched off the centering, so that, and I've reversed it. I'm going on the assumption here, because I have to make some assumptions about how you fly your models, how you like it set up. I'm going on the assumption that with the stick fully forward you want no flap, and stick fully back you want full flap. And that's why I've reversed it. If I didn't, it would go from 100% with stick forward to 0% with the stick back. But if you prefer it the other way around, that's up to you. But certainly you want the centering switched off. Otherwise, 0% would be with the stick there, and you'd get, up flap and down flap, which you're not wanting. You want neutral flap and down flap only. Okay, let's go with that. As I often do in my demonstrations, I have changed the servo assignment, so do not worry if it looks different to your servo assignment. The reason I've done it is simply when we use the servo monitor to demonstrate what we've done, it's easy to keep track of what servo is which. So I've got both ailerons on the top row, both flaps on the second row. You do not need to do that. It's just done to make the demonstration easier to follow. Okay, let's move into fine tuning. I have set up my 3 flight modes: speed, thermal. Default mode I'll leave as the cruise mode. And in flight mode trims, I've gone for separate on the ailerons and flaps, and this time I've gone for a flight mode trim of 20%, plus 20% for speed mode, minus 20% for thermal mode. You will choose values to suit your model. These are just for demonstration so we can see something in the monitor. Okay, and if we look at the servo monitor now, it will move 10%, not 20%. So there we get 10% movement, 10% movement. Why? Because the clue is in the word trim. In Jeti, if it has the word trim, so flight mode trim or the trim buttons, etc., then it's going to move the servo 0.5% per percent here, whereas controls servo setup 1% moves 1%. If it has the word trim, 1% is worth half of that. So by setting 20% trim, we get 10% actual servo travel. Okay. So far so good. Let's have a look at what effect that has on the servo monitor. Servo monitor will stick for the flap is fully forward, so there should be no flap. Good. Let's go into speed mode. Good. Thermal mode. Good. Back to cruise mode. Now let's operate stick P4. Hopefully just the flaps will go down. Yes, there we are. They're operating fine. Okay. So that's got the basics of the model set up. Now the request was to operate a 2-position switch. We shall use this one here, SC. that gives a fixed amount of butterfly or crow braking and overwrites the P4 control of the flap so that it no longer works on it. So there's a couple of stages to that. We'll set up the butterfly and see how to do that. But that will, of course, will still leave the flap control P4 operating the flaps as well as the crow braking. So then we'll just have a quick look at how we can disable it. So let's go into fine tuning. I'll show you something else I've done, and that's to go into the function curve, and I have set the flap function curve to flight mode separate. And I'll have a look at the curves in here and show you what I've done. We're in default or cruise mode. I've left this thing as standard so that in default or cruise mode you operate the P4 control and you have control of your flaps. But in case you've accidentally left it a little bit of flap in, or you just nudge it when you're operating the rudder or whatever, what I've done is change speed mode to a constant and thermal mode to a constant, left them where the zero where they come in, so that if you're in speed mode or thermal mode, the position of the P4 stick has no effect on the flaps. It's just a little tweak to help you. You don't have to do it, but if we have a look at the result on the servo monitor, here we are, default cruise mode, P4 stick operates the flaps. I'll change now into thermal mode. You can see it's not operating it anymore, which is good. Okay, come out of there, and into the main request, which was for the butterfly control. Okay, and I'm going to again make an assumption that you will only be operating this in the cruise, i.e. default mode. You're not going to be coming into land in speed or thermal mode. So let's make this mode specific to start with. Therefore, anything we set up now will only work in the mode that is here when we set it up. So it will go back to our default or cruise mode. The control will be this 2-position switch. So we switch it on, say OK to that. Now watch what happens if I move to the other modes. No control, no control. Lovely. So this will only work in the cruise mode. And we can come down now to our ailerons and flaps adjustment, and let's say we want, make sure again we're in that correct mode. Let's say we want 50% on the ailerons, and we'll go for minus 70% on the flaps. And there we are, that's it set. Watch what happens to these numbers as I move to the different modes. These should go back to 0. Yeah, so make sure you set up your number in the correct mode. Okay. And let's have a look at the effect now on the servo. So speed mode, a little bit of up, cruise mode, thermal mode, lovely. Now let's switch on the butterfly. There you go. There's the numbers we've set. And if I switch to speed or thermal mode, it'll jump to those modes. These will go back to the numbers set for the modes, not the crow braking. Let's switch our crow braking. We'll leave it switched on and operate the flap control lever P4. Now you see it's moving the flaps. We don't want it to do that. Yeah, we want a fixed amount that overrides wherever the flap position is. You could do it with a function curve in the way that we got rid of the flap control operating in speed and thermal mode, but you will have to set up yet another flight mode for it, switched by this and given the correct priorities. There's a very simple way just to zero out the flap stick, however. We come back out of here, say OK to that. If we come to Dual Rate and Expo, go to the flaps, edit that, The switch will be the switch that we're using for the crow braking. So, oops, choose that. Doesn't matter which way around you do it, to be honest, because in each direction we can set a rate. Now we want the rate for the flap lever when we're not in crow brake, which is switch there, to be what it is, 100%. But if we go to the crow brake position, we like the rate to be 0. And what that will do now is give us the full flap control on the P4 stick when the switch is up. But when we switch into crow or butterfly brake, it can't have any effect. Let's have a look at the servos now. So we've got crow or butterfly braking is on, the values that we've set, lovely. And I'll operate P4 now. No effect on the flaps. Lovely. There we go. All sorted. Have fun with that.